My name is Nicole Morin Scribner. I'm a volunteer with the Biddeford Cultural and Heritage Center. Today is Monday, June 23rd, 2025, and today I have the honor of interviewing Marc Hebert. We are conducting this interview at his home in Windham, Maine, and I know that your official name is Marcel, but you prefer to go by Marc?
My official name is Marc. Marcel is my nickname.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around.
See?
Well, we learned something already. So I usually like to start these interviews at the very beginning by asking where and what year were you born?
I was born on February 17th, 1952, during the big blizzard of 52. I was born at Notre Dame Hospital on Pool Road in Biddeford, Maine.
So you were born at Notre Dame Hospital in Biddeford.
Yes.
How did your family come to be in Biddeford in the first place?
Coming down from Canada, during those days, my father was born in 1905, but his dad, Joseph, came down to work at the mill, where there was the peppermill mill, and there was work, and housing wasn't bad back then, and good Catholic community, and thought that he could raise his family and make a living.
Mm-hmm. So, do you know? Did you keep the? Was he part of a big family from Canada, or?
That's a good question. I'm not for certain.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know for sure.
Did he ever go back? Do you know?
I'm sure he did. Visited, and relatives would come.
So you remember that in terms of some relatives coming
I
to visit?
remember them talking about it.
Uh-huh.
My grandfather died when I was 2,
Okay.
so I never really knew him, and his wife died before I was born, so I never really knew my grandparents on my father's side.
So am I understanding correctly? Is it your grandfather who was the first one who came to Biddeford, or was it your father?
No, and that's a good question. There may have been. I'm almost positive that it was Joseph that they came and started the family.
Mm-hmm.
And there was two daughters and 3 sons.
Now, did your father, if he came from Quebec, he must have spoken French?
Everybody spoke French.
Uh-huh.
Everybody spoke French. I believe they came through Nova Scotia because we're Acadian. And my Aunt Gertrude was really the legacy gal, and she did the mortuary cards, and she went up to Laval and got the family back to, it was like late 1400s or early 1500s from Normandy, and then coming to Nova Scotia, settling in Nova Scotia, whatever that would be. My great 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 grandfather Louis was an apothecary, and he treated not only his troop of French folks, English people, but he also treated some Native Americans. Well, actually, they'd be Canadian, wouldn't they? And if you take my name and do an anagram, it comes out Herb Market. He was an apothecary using herbs, and then so many generations later, my name, if you do the anagram, comes out Herb Market, which is quite interesting, I think.
So, did you speak French? Did they teach you how to speak French?
French was spoken, but they never really taught it to us. I think there was some type of a stigma related to that. And I was always sad that I wasn't more bilingual. I mean, I can listen to a conversation and I can pick up what I need to know about that if they're speaking slower. Key phrases and stuff, I kind of know where they're going. But as you know, Canadian French is much different than Parisian French, and kind of like the slang French.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I never was taught French. I was sad about that.
Mm-hmm. Now tell me about your mother. What's her family background?
So she was a Paris. She was born in Wilder, Vermont. Don't know an awful lot about their lineage except there was Iroquois Indian in our blood. Look at Vermont and New York State. The Iroquois Nation was right around there. So I think I was like an eighth. So that's kind of interesting.
How did you find out about that? Did she talk about it?
She
or-
did somewhere in the lore. It's interesting generationally. I mean, She was born in 1912. My father in 1905, and a lot of times within family groupings, they didn't talk a lot about certain things. They were very closed about some things. So kind of there's partying and kind of things kind of come out. Oh, did you know this or know that? And I went, do you know any more about that? Because that's very cool. But I got that. I understood that.
Uh-huh. Now, if she was born in Vermont, do you know how she ended up in the Biddeford, Saco area?
That's a great question. I really don't. It might have been spoken about, but it's something that I don't remember because her sister Rose lived in like western New Hampshire, close to Wilder. They kind of emanated from that area, and Janice, her other sister, married Roger Witham, and they were kind of in western New Hampshire. So we did get to see them every now and then, but it wasn't like we were in Old Orchard and they were in Biddeford. It was special occasions.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you know your grandparents on your mother's side? No?
No.
Do you know how your parents met?
So Mom worked at Bates way back when, and like I mentioned to you, my father had been married. She was a Guerin, Rose Guerin, and she passed from a heart attack that was an undiagnosed problem. So my father met her after then. How they met or got together, it was probably said, but I can't remember.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about your father. Did he work in the pepperell all the time, or did he do other work as well?
So back then, as you know, so there was 5 kids, and my father was the eldest, and he was taken out of school when he was 12 to work in the mill. And Morris, the next brother, he also. Jerry missed that one, and the girls, of course, not. Yeah, so imagine that at 12, working in the mill. Child labor laws, non-existent.
Yeah, and OSHA didn't exist either,
No,
so
that's
it
for
wasn't
sure.
the safest place to work either.
No, but it wasn't the tannery, which was a lot worse.
So your father worked there for how long? Do you know?
Let's see. Through his young years, he was in World War II, but as an older man. Let me think. He was 30. So that's 35. He would have been about 37 years old, but he wanted to fight, and he was bilingual. So he was stationed in France, and because he was bilingual, he was charged of the depot, where all the supplies would come in. And he was an older guy, and they weren't going to... So he was more responsible, right? He had the age on his side, he had experience. But all the guys knew, if you wanted something, go see Conrad, right? And there was great stories about that. Cigarettes, whiskey, all those types of things. So that was kind of, and he was in the Army Air Force. and he was a staff sergeant, 3 up and 2 down. I remember because he had his patches that you'd look at and salivate when you were a kid. Oh, Dad, can I have this? No, you can't have that. I want to put it on my coat. No, you can't do that.
So he did talk about his experience in the war.
Barely. You know, you got a flavor of it. But like I said, they were very closed, and which is really a good thing in some things. I think people sometimes are way too open, especially today with cell phones and things like that. There's too much information. So sometimes it's good to hold your cards.
So after he was in the service, did he come back and work in the pepperell, or?
No, he let me think. That would have been 40, 45, 46. So he met my mother around that time because they bought their house in Old Orchard. My sister was born in 45, 46. And they bought a house on Ocean Avenue. He used the GI Bill. He got $800. A lot of money back then. And he put a hefty down payment. He got our house on Ocean Avenue. I think it was $6,500. And the mortgage was a duplex split horizontally. So at street level, it looked like it was just one floor, but it went down, and there was a rent. His mortgage was $44 a month, and he rented out the apartment downstairs for $11 a week. So on the 5th week, he'd have $11 extra. So he'd take us out to eat, wherever it was. I remember the Wonder Bar. I remember the old Grove, which used to be down the street from Ken's place. 8 clam cakes for $1.
So
Different, and actually there were clams in it.
yeah, I hear you. So now did I see in some of the information you provided that he also worked like at a store?
Yes. So Boston Shoe Store had originally started in Portland, and they had a satellite store on Main Street in Biddeford. So my father was quite gregarious, could hold himself very well, and was super friendly. And if you know your merchandise, great traits for a salesman. So he sold shoes. It was Marty and Bill Clennett. They were awesome to my father. My father worked for them for about 40 years. And he transferred to Portland. And he was the assistant manager of the Portland store. And he dressed the windows. So he had very much of an artistic flair. He'd do the seasonal stuff. It's interesting. He also was... Do you remember when they would have ladies' shoes where you could dye them to match their dresses? Well, my father was the dye guy. So he was downstairs, and he would mix and match the dyes, and he would match it like flawless. They were perfect. So he got that job because he was so good at it. Interestingly, I was in color as a painter. And then my son, our son Noel, was in color, and he was a master printer for years. He's changed professions, but it's interesting how that went.
The progression, yes. Now, did you, when you were growing up, did you ever used to go see him at the store?
Oh, sure, because I went to Chevrolet's, and sometimes my ride wasn't organized, so I'd just take the bus in town, and I'd go and hang out. And then I'd just walk around town. And that's where I got to meet Ruthie Baker. Ruthie was the record buyer for Portress, Mitchell and Braun. And then Ruthie opened up her own store, which is called Recordland, which was infamous, of the place to go buy records anywhere. In fact, I was 14 or 15 when I met Ruthie, and we became lifelong friends. She was my mentor as far as helping me understand the blues, which I loved so much and still do, but she taught me that it was an American art form from jazz. And so she also, there was a place called Paul's Mall and the Jazz Workshop, which are just outside of Boston in Saugus on Route 1. And she took us, we were like 15 or 16, and we got permission from our parents, and she took us down to see these outside jazz cats. Sun Ra and I'll remember the other one. But they were in the dashikis. This was in the 60s. This is height of jazz down there. And they knew Ruthie because she was selling their records in Portland. So it was quite an experience for a young person. And as I was classically trained on the piano. And was Roland Kirk. He played two horns at once in harmony. And he came over to the table and said, "Hey, little brother, you're hanging out with Ruthie Baker." Said, "That's cool." And I said, "Hey, when you were doing that, was that a C major 7th arpeggio?" He goes, "This little brother's schooled." And we had this really great little connection of this, 50-something black dude and this 16-year-old white kid, and we were communicating. There was no racial lines. It was about two people communicating about something they both loved. Too bad the world wouldn't be like that today.
Was that your first exposure to diversity?
No. We had the Simpson family, which were Jamaican, who lived in Old Orchard. And we also had Robert Clark. He had some cabins out on the Portland Road. And of course the Cummings family, who owned the Cummings boarding house. The Cummings boarding house was a Negro Green Book place where African Americans could go and feel safe about having a place to stay. They also housed the black musicians playing on the pier from the 40s on. Duke Ellington gave their daughter piano lessons, if you can imagine that. So Cab Calloway, Louis Armstrong, Frank Sinatra played out there, Benny Goodman, but that was right in Old Orchard Beach. Pretty amazing. So yes, I had some experience with diversity young. I was very proud and happy to have that.
Well, I definitely will get into even more depth with regards to your musical history and how you got to be where you are today. So I go back to your parents. Was your father involved in any organizations in the community?
Yeah, he loved the Elks. And he became, I can't remember what the top of that was. Exalted ruler. And he was the exalted ruler for quite a while. And I remember as a kid that events were very special. It was black tie. And when they had their New Year's party, they were all dolled up and having a good time. And people from Saco, the DeChambeaus, Phyllis was like my aunt, and we were very tight. And she was the Register of Deeds like forever in Alfred. But that was that group, and they'd go party and have fun. And my father, with his gregariousness, was perfect for those roles because even from humble beginnings, that never shackled him, or he just rose to the occasion because he was just a sweetheart of a guy.
So tell me a little bit about what your mother was like, what she did for work, and was she involved in any organizations?
So, Mom at that time, Dad worked and Mom stayed at home. Although Mom was, when she grew up, she graduated from Thornton Academy, and she went to this secretarial school. I can't remember what it was called, but then she went to work for Bates as a secretary. So she had aspirations. As she got older, really older, she thought what she could have done if she would have been born like in the 60s, because she had that drive, and she was really intelligent. So when I was in school, after I was like in first grade, second grade, she would get a job like working in the kitchen at school in the food program. And then as I was in like middle school, she got a job at a place called John Roberts in Biddeford, which they made men's suits and stuff like that, and she worked there for a long time. And she was very proud, like a lot of women were at that time, to be able to contribute to the household. And I mean, they would go off on little trips. I mean, it wasn't, traveling to Paris or whatever, but they would go out and have fun and be able to take us out for, dinner every now and then. And she did that for quite a while. most of her adult life. She was a seamstress, and a damn good one.
Now, did she get involved in any community organizations as well?
She was, what was it, PTO, Parent Teachers Organization. She was in the Cub Scouts, helped out with that, and she loved the Sodality, which was the Catholic organization. So she had her things that she was involved in. Yeah, my father was also a coach for Town League baseball. He was a good player, and I took after him as a pitcher.
So now talking about your childhood, what's a favorite memory from when you were a young child at home?
There's quite a few. As I mentioned when I was inducted this year, I remember being very young, maybe just 2, that I was mesmerized by Walt Disney's Fantasia. So music really spoke to me, even at 2. There's a picture of me sitting by my little Victrola, and I'm kind of just, I'm in it. And then after all those Disney records, and then as I was growing up, my sister was 7 years older than me, so she was starting to listen to like the 50s stuff. Bill Haley and the Comets and Chuck Berry and some really great rock and roll. And then more sophisticated stuff, Peter, Paul and Mary and Simon and Garfunkel. And my ear was bending into those things. And then WIDE had an FM broadcast, not an FM broadcast, but late at night they were able to play current music. Like after 11, the station let them play deep cuts from all these bands, like early Doobie Brothers or whoever it might have been, and that was really fun to hear growing up. So music in that way. Parties, Christmas parties. We have there was so much of that going on back then, where people would come over. And of course, I was playing the piano, so I would be the entertainer. I would play my recent classical piece, or I'd pick up some popular music that was, would help with the party. And we'd go out. There was relatives were always important. Going over like after church depending on where their dinner was. Like usually people would go to church and then have dinner, right? And then after that we'd go visit and hang out, so you get to know your cousins a little better. And those were always very, very important. And playing sports, and the kid stuff.
So you said, your parents really encouraged you with music. You started taking, I think you alluded to taking lessons?
Yeah. So my parents saw the spark in me of, humming and singing along in pitch. So they weren't by any means able to buy a piano, but they were able to, was it Atkinson's? It was something like that, where they were able to get a spinet, a top end piano, not a large grand piano, but it was an upright, and it was smaller though. And it must have been in one of those furniture stores, and they were able to pay for it on time. And that was how my sister also took lessons. So it was Molly Welch and Saco first, so they'd have to cart me over there, and I was very diligent of learning my. Taking this seriously. My sister, not so much so. And that's cool. But I was appreciative of, I knew that. And then as I was progressing, Molly said, you're advanced. You need to go somewhere else. So this woman named Blanche Boisvert lived on Boisvert Avenue, and they had a rooming house that they'd rent out in the summertime, but she gave private lessons. She was classically trained at the Sorbonne, and she had performed, and she was older at the time we went, and a bunch of us went and took lessons from her, and she was a task mistress, which I appreciated because I'm that way. And I recall we always had these great recitals in the spring, and she'd rent the York Hotel or whatever, and it was a big deal. And she says, "You're going to play Franz Liszt, Hungarian Rhapsody No. 4. I'm going, okay. And she sat down and she played it. And there are these double octaves, and they're cascading. And I've got smaller hands, and I'm going. She goes, "You practice, practice." And I did it, and I was on Youth Cavalcade that year, and I won the talent contest because I played that piece and I nailed it.
So, Youth Cavalcade, can you tell us what that is?
That was a variety show on Channel 6. It was hosted by Olga Lemke and Don McWilliams, who was a personality on Channel 6. And it was kind of cool because you felt really special, right? There's the cameras, and like I'm 10 or 11. And it was a big deal, right? And you're going to be on live TV. Don't screw up. Pressure's on. And I remember they were very welcoming. And I'll show you later. I got a Western Union telegram from Big Bill, who was head of the Happy Day Camp, and that they were so proud of me. And they sent up a Western Union telegram from Florida, where they were staying during the winter. So that was a big. I got a little trophy, and it was for a 10, 11-year-old kid. That was very cool, which just spurred on my interest in music.
So you were very comfortable performing in front of others from a very young age?
I had the training. So Mrs. Boisvert, Blanche, as I got to call her later on, we had a study called deportment. She goes, "I want you to watch Liberace. And I want you to watch other pianists if you can, and watch how they play. And watch how they hold themselves with a straight back and a little flair." So she taught me stage presence. And that's where it began.
Mm-hmm. And so you never went through any of those phases of you didn't want to practice or you were
Yes, I
tired
did.
of it? You did?
Well, it's spring and summer. And I can hear the kids out playing baseball. Oh, Mom, just a typical 10 or 11-year-old kid. But I knew I had to face Mrs. Boisvert the coming week. And I'd better have my Chopin etude just right. And she taught me technique, tone, which I transferred to the guitar later on.
So you mentioned something about, is it Happy Day Camp?
Yes. So Auntie Lynn and Big Bill were wonderful, wonderful people. And they had a summer camp for boys. And it was located where Radley's Market, it's a Shop and Save or something now in Old Orchard. It was right across the street where those buildings are. Now it's something different. But they had a main house, and then they had all this ground out there where there was a tetherball. So it was kind of like a sports camp, but it was run like on a point system. Why? Because at the end of the year, if you were in the top 10 boys, you went to Fenway to see a Red Sox game. I went there many times. So they were wonderful. They'd come and pick you up at your home and your bag of lunch. And they provided, they had Oakhurst white milk and chocolate milk. And, during the afternoon when we were playing something, there'd be like a bell or a whistle, and they'd take like 2 big handfuls of candy and throw them out in the field, and everyone would stop what they were doing and go grab a banana split or a root beer barrel or whatever. Rainy days, we'd go over to the Lions Club, and we'd hang out and we'd play games. And in those days, we'd go like to Oakhurst Dairy. Remember the old King Cole and Circus Time? We would go there and get a plant tour. And at the end, I remember this, we'd get a bag, cheese corn, popcorn, and my favorite, potato sticks. But those memories. And we'd go to the movies. So it was a really well-organized situation. And I remember this, it was $8 a week, which was a lot of money back then. But they thought it was important for me, and I met lifelong friends through that.
So I don't think that I mentioned, although you were born in Biddeford, but when you were growing up, you were living
Old Orchard.
in Old Orchard where your parents had bought the house.
Yes.
And so you started out going to grammar school at what school?
So it was on School Ave in Old Orchard. I can't remember what the exact name of it was, but I went there. It's a primary to grade 3, then over to Jameson for or grade 4 and 5, and then the federal school, which is 6, 7, and 8. And that school got burned down. And the boys, it was Cody, a Hayes, and there was another young man. They put gasoline. It was like a Quonset hut, and it was like a wood floor. And they put gasoline in, and when they lit it, the explosion blew them right out because it created a draft. Oh yeah, they it was a federal building, so they went to jail for like 20 years, and they were like in their like 18, 19 years old.
So they
Arson.
intentionally
Yeah.
set the school on fire.
Yeah.
Any memories about when you were like, especially at the grammar school at that phase?
Tons. Had great teachers. Mrs. Taylor, Mrs. Martin were like 2nd and 3rd grade teachers, and so different than today. There was law and order back then, and because you didn't want to besmirch your family's name, you didn't want a problem. You'll recall those days. But they were great teachers, and I loved history, and I loved English, I loved science. Math, I wasn't a great math student. I was a really good math student early on, but when you got into algebra and trigonometry, that wasn't my thing. But I remember the tightness. I got to be a school guard, cross guard, 3rd grade. 4 and 5, Helen Marshall was an older woman, and she taught English and history. And I remember we had to draw maps of Maine, and I was up really. I was working on the end of it, and I had colored all the counties and all that stuff. And my father came in and he goes, "It's 11 o'clock." I said, "I'm not done. This is going to be just right." So when I gave it to Miss Marshall, she gave me an A+. She goes, "This is incredible," because you had to do it freehand, and in size, proportional. That was a great memory. Then 6, 7, and 8, I had more good teachers. Ann Mullen. See, I was a paper boy in the 6, 7, and 8. So I was at my teachers' houses, so I got to see their husbands and their family. Kind of an inside snoop thing. It was kind of interesting. So Arlene Fitzgerald, Ann Mullen, and I remained close to these women all my life, and especially Bonnie Smith. In fact, I saw her 3 weeks before she died. She was 96. My father selling shoes. She had really small feet, like 4.5, as an adult. So when my father would go to shoe shows in Boston with another gentleman named Dave DeChambeau, who was son of Phyllis, who was the Register of Deeds. So close family, and he would get any 4.5 he could find, and he brought Mrs. Smith. She bought every pair, but we were friends until she passed away 2 years ago. And Mrs. Mullen, Ann. I'm still very tight with her daughter Kathy, and there's 5 or 6 of us who go out to lunch every 5 weeks from grade school. From when we were 5 years old, we still hang out because we were that tight.
Wow. So did you end up going on, when you were growing up like that, did you go on any vacations with your...
Not done with school. So in middle school, I played on the football team when I was in 8th grade. And I wasn't great. That wasn't my sport. Baseball was my sport. But I played it and got my butt kicked. But that was cool. It was all part of learning. But we won. In fact, I've got our patch. We were 7-0, undefeated. And during that time, I played a lot of baseball. I was in town league and little league. And Sheverston. No, I went to Sheverston. Okay, maybe I'm getting ahead of you.
No, that's okay. I was just wondering in terms of, lifestyles at that point, in terms of, whether you took any family vacations.
Yeah, we did. We would go visit Mom's family over in New Hampshire. We like to do areas where there was something we could go visit, and there was an attraction, whether it was a museum or something interesting. Other than we weren't campers, we didn't do any of that stuff. I did that more with my wife's family when we were married. But as we were young, we would just do a lot of day trips or weekends. Like what was that? There was an animal farm, Benson's, wild animal farm. We'd go over to Benson's and hang out there for a couple, 3 days, or go to Boston.
And sometimes people came from great distances to go to Old Orchard Beach, and
Yes.
you were right there. So did you go swimming in the ocean a lot? Did you go to the beach a lot?
Yeah, we were 5 minutes from the beach. I lived on the beach. I used to bug people for their bottles. I was an entrepreneur way back then because they were 2 cents. You know what 2 cents gets you at Wortman's store? And with penny candy? So, and I was very polite. I said, sir, would you like me to get rid of your bottle? Oh, sure. And I had a bag. I get like 18 cents. Oh, my God. But I was a saver because I wanted things. And my father said, you're going to have to work. That's where the paper route came in.
Mm-hmm. What was your first big purchase that you saved up for?
My guitar and amp at Murphy's Music. In fact, I have a note for you. My aunt, well, it's Phyllis DeChambeau. I called her my aunt. We were very close. And they sent me a check for $3 for my birthday. And I said, I'm putting this away because I'm saving up for an electric guitar. I've got that from 64 or 5. I'll share that with you.
So you were how old when you made this big purchase?
Let's see, probably that was the first one. I was probably 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
I saved up my money.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was cheap stuff. It's probably $65 back then. That was a lot of money for a guitar and an amp.
Murphy's Music Store.
That's correct.
What's the legacy of Murphy's Music?
It should be in the Hall of Fame, along with Rapid Ray. The brothers were great. They really put up with a lot of us kids, listening. And you got to buy that thing,
So what was for people who hear this who were not familiar with what a music store was back then, what's something that's unique about the music stores and Murphy's back then?
Well, it catered to music. So anything that was music. So you could get your 45, and later they sold albums. They sold sheet music for piano, guitar. Then there were the accessories. They sold high-end guitars like Fenders and things like that. Then they had a side window. They branched out to choral and some other stuff, as music stores usually do. Little PA systems. And so it was really a niche market back then.
And what did they offer so that you could try out a song before you bought a record?
There was like a little booth, and there was one of those old record players, and you could put it on, and ding, and then whether they had headphones, I don't think they had headphones. It had a little speaker in the front, so you could kind of, and of course, being kids, we go in there and listen to the thing. I'm not interested in that one. And of course, they were very patient, and they finally worked around that, because kids would hang out all day, right? So you have to kind of set the bar.
So moving back into the school theme, so you went from schools in Old Orchard to then you went, how did you choose to go, where to go to high school?
My parents chose. You're 14, and that was 1966. So drugs are starting to come in, and we're a beach town. There was a lot of drugs in Old Orchard Beach. A lot of drugs. Old Orchard Beach was a hub of drugs. You had drugs coming from Montreal, from New York City, and it was a hub. So obviously in the winter things slowed down, but you had hotels, motels that were opened up and had winter. People would come and hide in Old Orchard. It was a great place to come and hide. So my mother and father, I was almost a straight A student, and I passed Sheriff's test flying colors. And they wanted me to go to a prep school. They wanted me to go to college. And it was good. What I didn't like was being taken away from my friends as I saw it. I mean, it wasn't a boarding school, so I came home, but I got home around 5 o'clock because my first year or two I was with this woman named Mrs. Frechette who lived at the beach, who worked at the Chancery. So she got out at like 4:30 or 5, so I could do all my homework, and then, or sometimes I didn't want to wait, so I'd call her from the office and say, hey, I'm going to go see my dad, and take the bus in town. So they made the decision. It was tough. First year, couple of years was tough. Adjusting. Suit, coat, and tie. No chinos. I mean, it was white shirt, no fancy tie, straight and narrow. Hair above the ears. It was military.
So that was a difference, a big difference from
It was
public
huge.
school. Yeah.
It was huge. As my friends are growing out their hair, and I was a musician. I was playing out. I met other musicians there, but it was different. It was a challenge.
So what was going out like when you were in high school? What did you guys do for fun?
So, of course, being a musician, we were at St. John's, St. Joe's. I was in Portland at the Sheriff's dances, or I'd go over to, oh my God, what was that called? Fry Hall. It was on Free Street, kind of a rowdy place. I used to sneak into the Cameo Lounge, which was on St. John Street, because I wanted to hear the music. And I would bribe the bouncer. I said, hey, listen, I just want to come hear the band. I'm going to sit in the corner, I'm going to have a Coke, and I'm not going to say a word. If I do, throw me out. But I just want to hear the band. And I'm not sure about the liquor license, about my being in there, but I wasn't performing. So he could have made up some story. And I gave him a couple of bucks. It's okay, And that's what I would do. I went to Joe and Nino's Circus Room, which was down in the Old Port, and that was a really rough place. But they had all this great music. So I would do that. There was a place in Biddeford that now it's a funeral home, Hope Funeral Home, but that had bowling, and it had a pool. We would hang out there, go to Alex Pizza, and of course, in the summertime, I never left the beach because I used to go to the Palace Ballroom all the time and saw all those bands. I begged my parents when I was 14. I said, I've got to go hear this music. I said, I'll be home right after. I'm not going to dilly-dally. And I did. And I got to see everybody. The Zombies, the Searchers, the Beach Boys, the Turtles, the Buckinghams, Tommy James and the Shondells, the Blues Magoos, Spanky and our gang, B.J. Thomas and the Triumphs. I mean, I can go on and on. But I saw the cream of the cream, and I would stand there and take notes. And I'd look, and I'd see the amps, and and it was that fantasy. Someday, I want to do this. I mean, really do this.
Now, they would let you in there. How old were you when you were going into
Well, they weren't serving alcohol.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Bilodeau and Bergeron, who did St. John's, also did the Palace. They expanded their empire. Smart guys. Really great producers of that early scene. Because these guys were going into Hampton Beach Casino. The old Palace held 3,000 people. Think about that. It was on the second floor. There was a movie theater underneath. I was in heaven. That's where I lived, playing pinball. Yeah, it was great. So I was there doing that and sneaking out to Serenity Hill out in Naples.
How did you get to these places?
I had friends who had licenses, and we'd drink. We'd go up to Bargains and buy beer. Whoops, Bargains. I don't know if you know about Bargains. Oh, that was on South Street. Little package store. Oh, and you... Gordon sent me. Really? So he was selling 6-packs for $3 of 12-ounce Bud and $4 for 16-ounce Bud. And that was a lot because they were selling for 99 cents or $1.49, and who cared? You were 16 getting beer. So we were, raising hell and doing those types of things, as kids usually do. And we were into the sports cars. Had friends that were a little bit older who had GTOs and Chevelles, and we're just riding just cruising, right? Let's get stereos on, living large.
So when did you start actually playing in a band?
When I was 13. My first paying job was at Charlie's Drive-In in Old Orchard Beach. It was 1965. I was playing keyboards back then because I was classically trained on the piano. Steve Terrell, local boy, his father was a plumber, and he got some guys together, but they wanted a keyboard player because they wanted to do some doors and other types of things. So Steven comes down to the house, and I knew who he was, and he was a pretty good drummer back in the day. And he goes, "Hey, we want you to play keyboards." I said, "I don't have a, He says, "Don't worry, my father will buy it. You want in?" I said, "Yeah." I said, No. I need to talk to your father." So I drove my bike up to see Mr. Terrell. He was a great guy. And I said, "Steven's got this plan." He goes, "Oh, I know all about it. I'm all in." He goes, "I'll get you whatever you need." He goes, "I want you boys to play, have fun, and get off the street." I said, "Really?" And we went up to Murphy's and got an Ace Tone organ and a little Premier amp. And there you go. And I light my fire. 96 Tears, Question Mark and the Mysterians, and all that stuff. We played at the Ocean Park Rec Hall. There was in the Ocean Park part of that, which was a Baptist community, right? But the kids, and we would play music.
Now, where did you practice?
When I was with Sabbath, which was Paul Gardner and Pete Carrier and Tom Dakota, we practiced underneath St. Joe's Hall. There was a kind of a back door, and there was like a little storage area, and we'd clear it out. We practiced in there.
Now, St. Joseph's Hall, you mean the parish hall
Yeah.
in Biddeford?
Yeah, because those guys were all from Biddeford, and Paul, bless his heart, would come pick me up. And Paul was, a couple, 3 years older than we were. Peter and I and Tommy are about the same age. But Paul, he had a little bit longer hair back then, and he was a sweetheart of a guy. And he explained to my mother and father that, hey, I'm going to take care of your son, no shenanigans. Okay. And I knew that time was important. You know what I mean? I would keep my word, and I was able to do that. So we played all those places and had fun. And we played the Palace in Old Orchard in that band. I've got pictures for you, too.
That's really something when you stop and think about it, because, when the rock and roll bands were first coming out, especially with the long hair and everything, that might not be what a parent would think. This is what I'm going to encourage my kid to do to stay out of trouble.
Well, I was doing really well in school, and that always was priority. That I remember Sabbath really started to blossom, and I was getting out of high school, and I had been accepted at BC and BU. I didn't have the money to go, so I went to it was Gorham State Teachers College, but they became part of the university system, so it became Pogo U, Portland Gorham. And I went to USM. Very happy that I had done that. But they went on to play more fusion type music. And so I was going to school and I was working. So music was the sideline, and I did gigs in the summertime. But I worked for the nuns in Bayview. There was a convent there. And I would work breakfast and help set up for lunch. And then I would go afternoons and evenings to school.
So let's see, you were in high school in the late 60s.
66 to 70.
So the Vietnam War was
Mhm.
happening. That was kind of like
Yeah, it was.
big time back then.
It was.
How did that impact? What do you remember about that?
A lot.
So tell me what your memories of that
I
are.
had a very dear friend, his name is Steve Brusso, and I knew his family very well. And Steve was a mentor to me. He's an excellent blues guitar player and had a vast album collection. And we became very, very close friends. And Steven's dad, Ernie, was the postmaster in Old Orchard and a tremendous artist. He did hand carvings and painted. In fact, it was on the wall, the history of postal service. Should have been in a museum. It was amazing. He pushed Stephen too hard, and he had been a Marine, so Stephen had to be a Marine. But Stephen was a tender, soft, wonderful man. And he went to Vietnam, and he never came back. He came back, but he never came back. It destroyed him. So, at 17, they started calling the draft. And my number, it was 325. But I wasn't eligible. My number, when I turned 18, I became eligible, was 189. And they drew up to 179. But I was going to have a 2S deferment going to college. And my father and I had a very honest talk about the war. And I said, if I hadn't been in school, I would never have gone to the war. In fact, I would have gone to Canada and found some relatives, because I didn't believe what you did when you fought Hitler and fascism and that. I would understand that. But this was more, this wasn't this. This was nation building. This was an awful thing that we did. 58,000 boys and girls lost their lives, plus countless Vietnamese. And we were in Cambodia and Laos and where we shouldn't have been. So, yeah, I was fortunate and supported, marched in the anti-Vietnam marches. Very, very against the war. As it escalated to 500,000 troops. And, Johnson was getting bad information. Anyway, that's a whole political thing I won't get into. But we know the history of that.
But it definitely, had an impact, back then. It was a very big fact of life that you needed to
that
take into
along with the
consideration.
assassinations of Martin Luther and the Kennedys and Malcolm X, they were all assassinated.
Do you remember, where you were when some of those happened and what the impact was?
I was 6th grade in Mrs. Mullen's class, and it came over to the intercom that the president has been shot in Dallas, November 23rd. I remember that like I'm talking to you right now. It was huge. I remember I cried. As a young boy of 12, it was powerful. Because I saw something in, I knew his military history, and didn't know a lot about Joe at the time and all of that stuff. But, and what happened with the Bay of Pigs and, before that and all of that, I thought he was sincere. And I like to term myself a Kennedy Democrat. Very centrist, moderate, but care for people.
Mm-hmm. So we will, so you decided, how did you decide what you were going to do after high school? I know you said that your parents wanted you to go to college. What was your thinking process of what you wanted to accomplish there, and how did you decide to go to Pogo?
So music was important to me. And if I had gone to Boston, chances are, well, I couldn't afford it, first of all. So that was a major factor. And there was not many scholarships back then. I mean, I had great grades, but, I didn't have magna cum laude. I was cum laude, but I wasn't, magna cum laude. And I wasn't a real sports guy. Sheriff said no baseball team. I kind of did. I was horrible at basketball. I tried out for the team, and Mr. Bernie, guy says, I know I suck. But, I gave it the old school try. But, so I wanted to continue my education, and it was something I could afford. And I could work, and I could manage. There was great people where I could say, hey, I'll be full-time, but I need to do this. Can I do some nights? I can do like late afternoon, and can I do? And they said yes. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then at that time I met a gal, and we were very close, and we lived together. So she kind of helped me, so I didn't have to do my day job, and I could go days. But my final year, I had to do 18 credit hours my first semester and 21 my second to graduate at that time. And I was busy because I majored in psychology and sociology with an English lit minor. So I had papers beyond papers. I discovered an electric typewriter, which saved my butt. But I graduated, and my parents were alive, thank goodness, to witness that. And I've got pictures of that too. That was a very proud moment. My sister was the first one in our family to graduate from college, and I was the second.
So what had you thought you'd be doing with your degree in psychology and sociology and English lit?
Well, after we took off. We left not long after I graduated. We had purchased a van, and my girlfriend's dad was pretty clever, and we built some piping. I've got a picture of that too. We built a box on top that was aerodynamic, so we could put clothes and stuff in. And we got in, and we just drove. We went up to Montreal. We went over to Ottawa and Hull. And it was outside during the summer. We saw all kinds of bands. And then we went over to Sault Ste. Marie. And then we came into the States there. And we traveled Route 2, which is across the top of the U.S. And then Route 17 was a Trans-Canadian highway. And we went like this. Minnesota, Saskatchewan, North Dakota, Alberta. So we zigzagged back and forth between the top states and into the Canadian provinces. We went to the Spokane World's Fair. It was 1974. We stayed there for 3 or 4 days, went over to British Columbia, took the ferry over to, I think it was Aberdeen, which is the top part there, and we drove 101, the whole Pacific Coast Highway, all the way down to Tijuana, stopping in Mendocino, stopping here, stopping there. One quick story. We're going down 101. We're in San Luis Obispo, and it's a beautiful summer day. It's like August, and there's this really good-looking guy, dressed to the nines, thumbing. I said, "Let's pick him up." So we picked him up, and I said, "Hey, what's your name?" He says, "Carl." I said, "Hey, I'm Mark. This is Karen. Where are you going?" He says, "I'm going to work." "I'll give you a ride." He goes, "Awesome." So we're tooling down 101. He says, "Okay, you got to take a left over here." So we came in, and the place was called the Great American Food and Beverage Company. It was kind of like what Ruby Tuesdays and some of those other places came with memorabilia everywhere. And he says, "Park right there." And there was like this special cordoned off place. He says, I should tell you the truth. He says, "My name is Carl, but he says, I own this place. And every Thursday I thumb to work. And whoever picks me up, I wine him and dine him all night." So we walked in, and Karen got flowers, and they brought us to our table. Anything you want to drink, place is yours. So we stayed there all the time, and the waiters and waitresses played instruments. This was a really cool place. And they'd stop, and they'd pick up a guitar, or they'd go over to the piano, or they'd, do something. So I got up and grabbed the guitar and played a tune, and gave the guitar to someone else, and sat by and goes, "Wow, that was really good." So we stayed there all night, and we were had a pretty good buzz on. So he says, you can crash in there. And so we did, and then continued our journey. But that was just one. I could keep you here for hours about that journey. I settled in Boulder, Colorado after that.
Mm-hmm.
And I played in the band out there. We separated on the road. It was after 4 years, and she wanted to try something different. She was 6 years older than I was, so she wanted to do some. It was amicable. But I settled in Boulder because my good friend Ron Lemire worked for John Denver, and I knew he was in Boulder. He was out on the road at the time, but he came back and we hung out. So that was another interesting thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So so you had all those experiences in other places. How did you, and why did you decide to come back?
You know how a salmon has got to get back upstream? I felt landlocked, and home was calling me. I'd been away for a while, and I was kind of broke. I'd run out of money, and there was a thing called drive away, and people who had gotten jobs or whatever, they had a vehicle, and you would drive their vehicle, and they would pay you to drive the vehicle, and they would pay for a lodging, and I'm going, great, because I'm a map reader. I mean, I can follow anything. So I called up the agency, and I was meeting this gentleman in Denver, and I said, I need some space. I have probably half a trunk and half a back seat. Well, when I got there, the thing was loaded. I couldn't have put, a small duffel bag in there. And boy, I said, I told you I need space. So we left. So I had enough money to take a Trailways out of Boulder. So I took a Trailways bus, a 3-day journey, and, from Colorado to Omaha, Nebraska, and Kansas, and up to Chicago. I did spend Thanksgiving in Chicago, and I went, and I was a kid. I was 22, and they said, you got 3 hours. So I wanted to find a bar. So I saw a bar, and I walked in, and it was just all black dudes, and the place stopped, and the bartender came over and says, hey boy, he says, I said, I was at the Trailway. He says, I don't give a shit where you were. He says, you better get out of here. I'm giving you a heads up. I said, hey. And I went back to the Trailways and didn't go anywhere. Anyway, and then on that leg, we were in Pennsylvania, and it was just me and this guy, the bus driver. He said, hey, do you mind if I stop at the house? And his wife had a pie and some sandwiches, because it was, part of that Thanksgiving run. And then went to, stopped at Grand Central in New York. I was on a bus. I mean, I had these places I would wash up the best I could, and right, on the road. And I got approached by a pimp. And, it's New York City, right? So then I pulled into Biddeford at the Thatcher, because that's where the bus and my sister picked me up. And that's the end of that, and the beginning of coming back to Maine in 75.
And so what did you do once you got back here to get started again?
My sister was teaching, and my parents' apartment was being rented. So I lived with my sister for a while. And I knew I couldn't live with her for a long time. So there was, and I was a strict vegetarian, had been for a while. And I had cooked, can I drop back? So when I worked for the nuns, I learned how to cook for 20-something people. And I learned how to use a Hobart machine and, big mixer, stuff like that. So when I was in Colorado, I was looking for a band and a job. I was walking down the street, and there was a bakery, and it said help wanted. So I walked in, and this very jovial man, his name was Mo, and he said, hey, I said, you're hiring. He says, have any bakery experience? I said, let's look. I said, throw me an apron. I said, he says, you making granola? Where's the recipe? So I threw the apron on. I started pounding the stuff in the Hobart machine, mixed it up. He had an old carousel oven. So put him in. He goes, wow. He goes, when can you start? I said, I think I just did, right? His name was Mo Siegel. Celestial Seasonings tea. So, what might have happened if I would have stayed? Who knows? But I never would have met my lovely wife.
And how did you meet your lovely wife?
Coming back from Colorado. It had been a while, and I was probably the next Christmas. I was invited to, yeah, it's about right. I was invited to a party in Portland. And I had brought back some jewelry. I was always one for having an income stream, you know, making a buck here or there. So I had a bunch of Navajo turquoise jewelries with sterling silvers, pretty gorgeous stuff. I had gone to New England Music. I had met Derek Burt, who owned New England Music, it was New England Hi-Fi then, and I knew all the guys there. So I went in and I had a nice velvet presentation and put it all up. I sold it in an hour. Everything was gone at top price. So I went to this party and came in the back way and had a beer. And I was talking to Bob, who owned the house. And then I walked in. It was a large living room. And I looked, and there was this girl sitting on the floor. And she had kind of a Joni Mitchell cut, you know. And our eyes locked. And there was like this magic, this thing. And I went kind of like this, and I walked over and I said, hey, listen, I know this is a lousy pickup line, but did you feel that? And she goes, I did. And I took her hand, and I saw one of the rings that I had brought back. And I said, did you get this from somebody from New England Music? And that she was currently going out with somebody. But we sat on the floor for like 3 hours. She was kind of in a transition. So that was like Christmas of '75. And then we kind of courted. And we were married December 5th of that year. 76. So we'll be 50 years next year.
Congratulations.
Still in love.
That's wonderful. That's what everybody aspires to.
Yeah,
Not everybody gets to have that experience.
Well, a lot of people don't work at it either. They give up. It's the funny thing about men is as they age, they forget to look into the mirror as they look at their spouse. And that we're all aging.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the denial mirror.
So you continued to play music, I gather.
Oh, sure. I had a pretty good reputation, and it didn't take me long to... So, I did some pickup gigs, and then I met some friends, and we formed a band called Jupiter Blues, which was, that was 76, 77, late 75 to New Year's Eve, 75, 76. So 2.5 years or so. That was a great band. That was Dave Wakefield and Pat Paquette, Bruce Wakefield, David's brother, Ronnie Morin. So all these guys had played together in Saco, you know, the Lost Souls and the Id and all that stuff. And then myself, and I had met a gentleman named Pat Caldwell when I was at USM, and we both were political science nuts, and we were sitting down having a coffee, and, oh, you play the guitar. Oh, you want to jam? So I brought Pat in, and that was Jupiter Blues. That was a great band. We did gigs with Sweet Grease and, you know, played everywhere. Morgan's in Camden, Showring and Brewer, the Shea in Waterville. You name it, we played it.
So where you were just speaking of your wife, and her name is?
Roberta. And her what she likes to be called Bobby.
So how did, because you know it can be, I've heard, you know, a bit of a challenge, because obviously if you're in a band, that means weekends, late nights, away on the road and whatever. How did Bobby handle that?
Well, Bobby had been on TV. She was a regular on Club 13 and Dave Astor. So she met the McCoys, she met Herman's Hermits, anybody that was through town came through there. So she knew what being an entertainer was because they would pantomime stuff. And she had a great voice. So, like most things, when you're looking at someone to marry, you choose wisely. And I knew her past, and I knew she loved music, and she had been involved with musicians, so I knew that she would understand. So it worked out. And she sang with me for a couple of years in a band called Street Level, that's Rare Beats. That was after Street Level. But yeah, we played. Do you remember the Cattleman's Party Town in Biddeford? No? Okay. E.J. Sully's, we played Ruby Begonias and Squire Morgan's in Portland, and we did college mixers, and yeah.
How did the bookings happen?
So I booked the band. I had business acumen, and like my father, pretty gregarious and fearless. So put together press packages, pictures, and back then there was only reel to reel. So basically it was club performances, and there was the name of the club and the owner, so they could call for a referral. Or when they saw the clubs we were playing at, kind of spoke to themselves. And then we became very busy. I didn't have time as much. So I got to Tommy Rowe, who owned Clockwork Entertainment up in Lewiston, and then he would get us jobs in other places. So between the two of us, we kept busy.
Because back then it wasn't, you can go online, I try to capture how doing business was
On the
different
phone.
back then. On the phone.
On the phone.
And it wasn't like your cell phone, so the phone wasn't always with you.
Well, no, and no pagers. I mean, this is, Jurassic Age. And you'd go to the clubs. I would make a personal appearance. The band would pay me. I said, hey, if I'm going to do this, I want gas money and lunch money. Taking my time to do it. But, they finally acquiesced when the job started coming in. But I knew if I did it, it'd be done right. And we'd work. And no one had and I collected the money and paid everybody. Because I took out a loan. I was the only one married at the time. No, Pat was married. But I knew Mel Wilbur at Saco Biddeford Savings really well because he had helped me. He will have helped me. That's a future thing with when I taught at Biddeford High. So you know what I mean. So I needed to make sure that was paid. Getting money from everybody and taking. Oh, what are you doing? To pay the taskmaster, but.
So you were walking around with all this cash.
No, we didn't make that much back then. We did play 49 nights straight at the Sandbar in Old Orchard, summer of '77. 7 weeks straight. Boy, we were tight. You play 3 sets a night, 7 nights for 49 nights straight. You got and then we could go practice during the day if we needed to. But we had a running tally of about 50 tunes so we could intersperse.
And so, but you did something else for work too besides play music.
Yes. I'd pick up side jobs. And then when that band ended in the 1978, I used my degree, and it was kind of like a teaching aid, but also teaching. It wasn't a full-time teaching job, but I was teaching full-time with special ed kids. Like I was working with this gal who was the full-time teacher, but I had like a shop class that I had with them, and I had a math class that I had with them. And that's where Mel Wilbur comes in, because I used him to get checkbooks and statements, because these poor kids only could read 3rd, 4th grade level. They were passed on, and there was a lot of abuse, verbal, physical, sexual. and it was really tough because there was no computers. It was all, gel things, overhead projector stuff, what I could borrow, beg, or steal from my sister who was teaching over at the middle school. Like, I knew this was not going to reach them, but visual stuff could. So I used the checkbook as my math class to teach them a life skill, because I knew that they weren't going on to post-secondary education. They were lucky if they could get through high school. They'd probably work at Shaw's or wherever, the shoe shops. But they knew how to use their checkbook. So Mel was very gracious. He's a wonderful guy. I walked in, said, "Here's what I need, Mel." He knew my family. We were all tight, right, from doing banking business with Saco and Biddeford for years. Within 10 days, I had them all with the kids' names on them. So Monday morning came, Jill, Stephen, Ben. They're going, "Mr. Hebert, what's this?" I said, "It's a surprise. You're going to learn how to do banking." "Oh, checks," but they all had void on it. "Yeah, nice try, Robert." It took me all year to have them be able to, but it was all worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a side job. And then in '78, I got into the painting trade. At that point, my father had moved over to the men's shop. He had 40 years in with Boston Shoe. As great people back then, they bought my parents a brand new refrigerator, a brand new washer and dryer, a brand new color TV, this beautiful gold Hamilton watch, and $1,000 in cash as a thank you for 40 years of service. Today, you get your butt kicked and out the door, right? But that's the Clennets. They were amazing people. So my father worked at the men's shop for quite a few years. And a lot of people knew him from working there. Right in Saco, downtown Saco, right? So, from that, there was a guy named Louis Marcel who was a high-end painter in Biddeford Pool. And I said, "Hey, talk to Louis." So Louis took me under his wing, and I learned how to do the old school. I was mixing my own stains. This was old school stuff. I worked for Louis for a couple of years, and then I moved on to somebody else. And during those times, I was learning to read blueprints. And then I started my own business and made the transition. That was probably 6 or 7 years I was ready to go. And I met all these people through working for Louis or working for Jim. Jim was out of Portland Paint Company. And I started to get work because I had a really high eye of quality work. And I lived there in Falmouth Forsyth and Kennebunkport, and I still have customers who still want me to do work, and I do part-time. But I made a good reputation for myself, work with people. We have a couple of jobs in Architectural Digest. I worked the high end. Did a vanity for Mariah Carey. She was married to Tommy Mottola, who ran Sony Records. So this was through Gordon Merrick, who had a business called Woodsmith. It was in Arundel. And he was on a custom millwork, high-end carpentry stuff. And I did specialty painting for him. When they would install, I would go in if there was mistakes or whatever, or things that needed to be buffed up and touched up. I would go in and make it look like nothing happened.
What was the name of your business?
Marc J. Hebert, Distinctive Painting and Design.
So I want to make sure that we have some time to talk about, then you had a big, unplanned, very impactful event that happened in your life.
Yes. I had just signed a $10,000 paint job for a good friend in Old Orchard. He was building a restaurant, interior, exterior. Called my wife, "Hey, let's go to Jamillo's." And I was happy, and I had bought a little car from one of my customers. Her husband had passed. And I said, "Oh, it'd be a nice little corporate vehicle." It was a Toyota Corolla. It was like brand new, and it had hardly any mileage on it. I got it for a great price. 42 miles per gallon. So when I was off doing like estimates and stuff like that, or a little car for us to outside of the van I used for work. It was a great little car. It was brand new. So I was down not Brackett Road. Yeah, it was Brackett Road in Gorham, and I remember my car was turned to the right because I was going up 202, and I looked to the left, I looked to the right, and I took my foot off the brake, and bang! And the next thing I know, I'm sitting out in the middle of the road, looking back from where I came from, and I had passed out, and I passed out again. I'm like this, and I had blood in my hand, and I was rear-ended by a woman who was on her cell phone, and the State Police Reconstruction Unit said that she was going over 50 miles an hour when she hit me. I was at a dead stop. So my car did a 180, and that thing, it was kind of like what had happened to me. It was like shaken baby syndrome, where my brain was bouncing off inside of my head because the impact was so great and the spin was so great that I had severe whiplash. My neck was out, all my ribs were out, and I had an open head wound because the seat exploded, and part of that went up into my head. And there was a woman across the street, her name was Amanda Broadstreet, who called the cops of the Gorham PD, before I even got hit, because she saw that the car was going to cream me. And my attorney played that for me because they could hear it at the police station. It was on record. It was recorded. And she came over to the car, and I had some paint stuff in the back in the trunk. The trunk was in the back seat. She hit me so hard. She was in an old Volvo, tank. I was lucky I wasn't killed. If there had been a cement truck or a big truck or a car coming down 202 at 50 miles an hour, I wouldn't be here talking to you. So she got me out of the car from the passenger side because she smelled something. And she had taken my work bag and my home phone. She called Bobby, and Bobby came. And when she saw the car, she threw up because it was like mangled junk. And I was on the side of the road. I was in shock. The rescue unit got there, and they put something on my head to stop the bleeding, and they just took me to main med. That Monday morning, I was on the couch, and I was in really bad shape. So began my odyssey of 7.5 months at New England rehab, where I had to learn everything because I had a severe traumatic brain injury. I had to learn how to walk. I had to learn how to speak because I had a severe stutter. I had to learn how to play all my instruments again, and I had to learn how to hold a brush and paint again. So began a 2-year odyssey of being out of work, no money coming in. We almost lost our house. There was no GoFundMe back then. Through the grace of great friends and my customers, we made enough money to survive. I had great therapists there who really helped me, and without them, my friend Ron, who I mentioned earlier, he happened to be here and was giving me these great massages. My good friend Dennis, he's my oldest friend, we've known each other for 68 years. He and his wife Patty paid for acupuncture and Chinese medicine from Fern Sao, who was the best from Boston up, was probably one of the best acupuncturist Chinese medicine people around. I had a good friend named Ron Mosiello, who's a DO, who helped put me back together because I had everything, my neck, everything was out of whack. So I persevered. And Phil Newell, who was the head of psychiatry, said, Mark, he says, I surmised that you were a guy that probably had 2 gas tanks running all the time. High energy kind of guy. I said, mm-hmm. And he said, how many do you have now? I said, I have 1. He goes, how full is it? I said, not very. He goes, good boy. He goes, there's a term called neuroplasticity. He says, you're right here. You're coming down the other bad side, but you're not over here. He goes, we can help you, but you need to take all the modalities we're going to give you, and I think you're going to be okay. And that began that journey. And through meditation, hard work. I remember I came down here and I couldn't put 3 chords together. And this year I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. So a lot of people don't know that. I think if they knew that, they would even be maybe more amazed.
What year did your accident happen?
April 14th, 4:45, 2006.
Do you remember the first time you were able to pick up your guitar and play it again?
It was a long process. And it took a long time to have confidence and to, I can notate. So I just would notate and here's what you did and just remembering, And so I became extremely depressed. Who wouldn't be, And I was angry, frustrated. And one of my practitioners, a gal I was taking occupational therapy with, mentioned to me that I might want to see my PC and get evaluated for that. And I had a great PC at the time, and his nurse was also wonderful. And I took the test. He said, you're lighting up like a Christmas tree. Just, how could you not be? He said, so in our family, maybe in some other French families, I'm not sure, but sometimes medication was looked like a weakness, and especially mental disorder. My mental disorder was caused by an accident, not because of some organic. Well, actually, it became organic because my brain was whacked. But I talked to my doc about that. But he says, hey, there's a new drug called Cymbalta. It's been out for about a year. He says, it also helps with pain, how it fires nerve centers. I said, let's go. So like most medication, it was a trial and error type thing. I remember I started, I think it was 40 milligrams. And I was watching TV, and it's kind of like that old thing about the drummer. You know a drummer's level when drool comes out of both sides of his mouth. That was me. So Bobby called up Chris, was my PC at the time, and said, yep, it's probably a little much. And we tried, when I hit 20, it was perfect because I could relax, I could focus on my therapies. A quick note about that. This gal who was my speech therapist helped me with my stuttering because of the PTSD for the car accident. I mean, so I thought a bomb went off. I didn't know what happened. Boom! My life changed. So there's a psychometric testing where you have a 4-hour session and then a 4-hour session in the afternoon. And there's blocks and there's all kinds of things for the therapist trying to figure out what parts of your brain are firing, which parts of your brain aren't firing. Example, she gave me all these shapes and she says, can you name these shapes? I said, oh yeah, there's a triangle and there's a square, there's a cube, there's a dodecahedron, She goes, great. Pulls it away. She goes, I want you to draw those shapes now. Gang. So that was pivotal, and for them finding out ways to help me. One of those was Sudoku puzzles. I hated them. So this gal, here I am on Friday, I'm doing my homework there, and I'm just like, Urgh. So I says, oh, close, but, So she rips out, she goes, here's your homework for the weekend, I'll see you Monday. So Saturday came around, and I said, I should probably get to these. So I went out on the porch, and I brought with me a baggie, an ashtray, and some matches. My wife's looking at me. And I lit the Sudoku puzzles on fire. I took the ashes and I put them in the baggie. So I went to see my friend, speech therapist, on Monday. We talked. She says, where's your homework? And I went, here's my homework. And she started laughing. Then she stopped. She goes, I'm going to give you an A for the most creative thing I've ever seen to get out of doing something. But let's get back to work. Yeah, so I thought I'd give that to you as a sidebar, as a humorous note to everything. But I'm telling you, I was scared. And I remember sitting here with these beautiful instruments, and I go, am I going to be like this for the rest of my life? Tears, sadness, despair. Yeah. But I said, I will not be defined by this one moment in time. And after I got through things, and I showed you how I was part of a weekend of a brain injury conference, and I gave a 50-minute lecture on resetting the tone of using music therapy to heal. And they didn't even have a music therapy, insurance wouldn't pay for it. Duh. Kind of like chiropractic or osteopathy years ago, where now it's, of course, it helps, but they weren't paying for it back then. But from that to this, over a period, I was probably a year and 3 or 4 months in, and then I slowly would go with this occupational therapist and walk around the hospital, and I would now try and do an estimate, something I could do, and I'm trying to think about numbers and stuff. And some of my contractor friends would hire me to do small rooms. They were just so beautiful to help me with my comeback, and I came back, and here I am.
So tell me about the first time you performed again after this.
That was interesting. I started a trio of friends, and they were top flight musicians, as I was, and we were called Pepperell Square. That was Scott Paquette, Andy Horvat. I had played with them prior to my accident, and we were an acoustic trio, and we did Beatles material and James Taylor, Neil Young, really, really great music with lots of harmonies. And I used to have a music stand. Strategies. So that's what we learned, and I still use them today, about my energy level and how I would place my work. In fact, I had, when we played this weekend, I had my music stand because there were some things I was learning new lyrics, so there they were right there. Little cheat sheet, as we'd call it. And they were very cool. And gradually I was, becoming more confident. And it wasn't a full band, so it was something that wasn't as noisy. I had to deal with now getting used to louder things, because that impact. I saw a counselor for PTSD. I mean, it was like amazing. I didn't know what I did, because I didn't know what happened. I thought a bomb went off. It did. A Volvo doing 50, and it hit me like this. So my car did the arcing spin. My head. Mm-hmm. My dura was torn. That's the skin that holds your brain in. It was torn. It was ripped. I was lucky I didn't have a brain bleed. I wouldn't be here.
So that must have been really emotional, especially the first time you really got up there and say, yes, I can do this again.
And so during my therapies, we formed a group called Voices. Your Voices, this is that Voices. So we became this wonderful band of gypsies, stroke patients, car accident patients, surgical accidents with, propoxia, where people's brains get a little funny. And we were a volunteer group that worked with veterans and stroke patients or other brain injured people. And I helped to start a music therapy for New England Rehab. I would go in and find out what people would like, and I would make little CDs, or I'd go in and I'd play. And it was all volunteer stuff. So this group, we won the Hospital Volunteer Association Award for the United States. Yeah, for our work. And I'm very proud to be part of that. In fact, I think I sent you a picture of that. I sent you a text of
we'll make sure that.
Yeah,
we'll make sure that
yeah. But that was quite an honor, and then being able to, and then I did that tri-state panel discussion at USM, where I was talking to music professionals that were teaching about being a musician and how I related to having a brain injury now. And that was quite an amazing, it was at USM at Gorham. There was 6 of us. I was the only panelist that had a brain injury, and everyone else was either a music therapist or a doctor in that field. So it was a really great balanced panel of here's the clinical, here's the actual, and someone who survived.
Wow.
And the write-up was beautiful. Whoever wrote that up was wonderful. So that accident caused, or helped me, I should say helped me, go from an A personality to a B personality. A lot more mellow. I still have my moments, but a lot better. I call that whole incident in time my mid-course correction, not my midlife crisis.
Gave you a whole different perspective.
Yep. What's really important.
So in light of all of that, tell me about when you found out that you had been chosen to be the 2025 Biddeford Area Music Hall of Fame recipient.
Before that, the year before, getting a call from Bob Charest and Roger Gagnon, who Bob was best man at my wedding, and we'd had band houses together. And Roger, I knew from when I was a kid, he used to come watch me play at the Palace. And then he asked me to play in the Corona Brothers. So they were on the phone together. And I go, oh, you two guys, this can't be good. And they started laughing. I go, hey, there's this thing that's putting together. It's Biddeford Saco Music Hall of Fame. And, the first person we thought of to play guitar was you. And I said, I'm all in, man. So that was the first. But this was amazing because it was looking at me as an individual and what I had done in this area, 60 years of playing music. And not just, I was started here, but I was all over the place. Up and down the East Coast, and music had been a big part of my life. But to be honored in that, I can't tell you how much it means to me. It's, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And then to also be inducted with the Corona Brothers, with Roger and the band, so Roger goes, you're a two-fer, man. You're a two-fer. So I have that distinction with Ron Perro, who I played with. Here he is right there, for 5 years. So there was a cross-pollination going on with all this music and all the bands, because we all wanted to play with the best, right? We were working hard to achieve that, and we did. So being able to play in this band, and Camille did such a wonderful job this year. We're so blessed to have this. Everyone works hard, and it's like you. We're all volunteers, right? We're taking our skills and our passions and doing something for a greater good, doing something for history, doing something that's out of yourself. I think people, and this should be taught to children, that when you're giving, you're receiving. And it's such a wonderful thing. And it some people just gravitate towards it. A lot of kids need to be taught. Like the Peace Corps in Vista, when kids got out of high school and they did a year or two out and saw what the real world was like, they changed their whole focus sometimes, right? Experience, the best teacher. So being with you today and your passion for recorded history and my passion for helping, wanted to be part of this, and being in this wonderful organization that lifts people up. Think about what happened when this happened and the Facebook lit up. People were throwing pictures out. And what is that, Nicole? It's community. So this whole thing has really driven community. And I'm so proud and blessed to be part of this band, part of the induction, and to continue. as long as I physically and mentally can.
Which kind of brings me to how I mean, it's obvious we could talk for hours because there's so much more information, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
My time is your time.
And one of the ways that I like to kind of wrap this up is to say, what is the one thing that you would want people to take away from hearing your story?
That life is powerful and memories are important. The things we learned years ago of honor and kindness and helping others, to pass those traditions on I see the lack of it today with we have this potential of these cell phones and computers which are amazing, but they're also so distracting. And it's kind of like a drug that people don't know how to handle. And what I'd like for people to take away from all of this is that community, the basic building blocks of our society, of people getting together to get outside of themselves, the selfishness and about me, and to give to others. Time is all we have on this planet. The older we get, the more we understand that. But I think as we get older, we understand those values we learned when we were kids. That when we give, we receive. The more we give, the more we receive. So I hope people can find the joy in the simple things of life and make sure they are in tune with their families and to pass on. It's like the running the race, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint. And don't burn yourself out because there's a long way to go, hopefully. And I hope that kind of sums that up. And just to be part of, to be part of our community, to play in all these great places. When we had the radio, right? We had the transistor radio, and then it became the Walkman, when you could actually put your own music on it, right? And how things have changed, and that was a good thing. But then it became like too much. And hopefully we could get back to a simpler way of, like we're doing now. A lot of things get lost in translation with electronic media. You can't read a person's eyes or their body language. And that's what a lot of kids, I think, are missing, is that you can hide behind words when you're not exposed to the reality of saying them and being accountable for them. So I'm honored, I'm blessed. Thank you so much for thinking me worthy to have this recorded. And I hope someone gleans something from this and moves them in a positive way.
Well, you've shared a lot of very important information, and what a fascinating life you've had up until this point. And I think that, like what you were saying, you obviously have learned some important lessons, and thank you for taking the time to share it with others.
There's so much more. This is just a small picture, but there's so much more. And that's all of our lives, right? Mm-hmm. There's so much more. But I thank you for your time, too, and to be part of this wonderful organization. Yeah. 2 thumbs up.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.